James Cameron's third film in the now Avatar trilogy released into theaters this past weekend. So today, I'm going to rank all three Avatar movies. No, not the Avatar Last Airbender movies, but the Avatar The Blue People movies. They're not called the Blue People movies, but hey, you can call them the Blue People movies if you want. Before I get started, I just want to say I'm not the biggest fan of this franchise. I checked it out for the first time, the first two movies, before seeing Fire and Ash, and I will say the franchise overall isn't for me. Over 3 hour movies for every movie in this franchise just kind of wore me out. So take that into consideration, where a lot of people love these movies. They're just not for me. This is just going to be my personal ranking of the trilogy. And before I give you my personal ranking, if you would, go down below, subscribe, hit the like button, hit the bell, and comment down below what is your opinions on this franchise, each individual movie, or what is your ranking of the franchise. And go check out my Avatar Fire and Ash review if you want to hear my more in-depth thoughts on it. With that said, coming in last place, Avatar, the original film in this franchise. I loved this movie throughout the first half of the movie. I thought it was great. And that's going to be a running theme throughout this ranking, is that the first half of these movies are much better than the back half. I loved being in this world. I loved seeing these characters. I loved the visuals. That's also going to be a running theme here, is the visuals. They all look great. I loved seeing how these different species on this planet work, the Na'vari. Absolutely loved all of that. I loved the duality between man and the alien, or the alien species. I loved the relationship between Jake Sully and the General. Loved every bit of it. I thought it was just a fantastic way to build the world. However, the longer we go through the film, I just am kind of getting more progressively bored, because the film feels like it's leading towards something big. And the big thing to happen to progress the story forward is they blow up a big tree and nobody fights back, and then we spend the next hour of the movie like trying to build an army to go fight the humans, and then all that stuff just doesn't really interest me as much as just hanging out with these characters, seeing the way the world works. And then the final battle, it's superficially entertaining. There's explosions, there's people getting shot in the chest with bows and arrows, and all that is superficially entertaining. But again, I would much rather be hanging out with these characters, learning how to fly the dragons, learning about the culture, because that's the stuff that was more interesting to me, not preparing for the war and then the war against the humans in the back half of the film. So I will say, for a movie that's 2 hours and 40 minutes long, I genuinely got bored near the back half of the movie, because that was not the stuff that I was there for. But I do really like how this movie sets up this world. Number 2 is Avatar 2, The Way of Water. Yet again, to sound like a broken record, I absolutely loved when we were diving into this world, exploring this entire world, exploring the different kinds of Na'vari, as now we got the Water Tribe and exploring that kind of world. I thought all that was really interesting. This movie is by far the best looking out of anyone in this trilogy. The water looks heavily drinkable, which is just a crazy statement, but it really does. Like, it looks like fantastic water. There are several sequences that just had my jaw on the floor throughout this entire movie. I love the way they bring back Kurch, the villain, and I love what they do with him from this film to Avatar Fire and Ash. I think he is a genuinely compelling villain. As much as I wasn't the biggest fan of the motive near the back half of the film, which was money. They can get money from the thing that's in the whale's breath or the whale's body, whatever. Wasn't really ecstatic about that, but I still really enjoyed that. I enjoyed the way this movie looked, and I enjoyed learning about this culture just like we did in the first film. I also love that Jake Sully now has a family, and we're having the family dynamic here. There's a death in the back half of the movie that just really impacts the film, that adds an emotional layer to it that we really didn't have with that first film. So just stuff that definitely improved over the first movie. But yet again, same flaw is it's over 3 hours this time. And this movie, by the time we get to the end and we're just having whales jump out of the water and things are exploding and there's fire and ships are going down and people are getting shot, I gotta say, the stuff that should be the most thrilling in this movie just doesn't really work for me. I would much rather, again, be learning about this world, be having what we had in the first half, rather than a bunch of big visual effects, explosions, and people dying, and the story actually progressing. Because once you get to that, it's very surface level. I mean, the first movie was just like a typical war movie. This movie, I mean, besides the visuals, the action is entertaining, but like it gets repetitive when it goes on for like over an hour long action sequence. It definitely gets repetitive, and it's just not as fresh or original as watching the beginning of these movies and learning about the world, which is the most impactful part of it. And this is the one that I can say that I definitely got the most bored by the end, where the first movie still had those moments. The third movie, we'll talk about that here in a minute, but this movie had a lot of great moments, but overall by the end of it I was like, okay, why are we continuing the fight where you had like 2-3 times where the big battle could have ended and you just kept the movie going and going and going? It's definitely too long and should have had some things cut out. Again, I enjoyed this one overall more than I enjoyed the first one, just because of how it expands over the first one. But again, the same flaws from the first movie. But my number one, my favorite film in the Avatar trilogy, their latest film, Avatar Fire and Ash, and personally for me it isn't even really that close. I really enjoyed this movie. This is the movie that I left having the best opinions about. Obviously, it looks great. Don't even got to talk about that. But it's a movie with the best villains, the best action, and just overall the best stuff in this movie. It's basically The Way of Water Part 2, honestly, where every plot line from The Way of Water that wasn't fully resolved in The Way of Water is taken over into this movie. It's resolved. And overall, the movie kind of feels episodic, where we just have these little scenes with the characters that feel like we're just continuing plot lines, kind of like an episode. It's crazy to think because, I mean, it's Avatar. We waited like over about 15 years, I think, for The Way of Water, and we waited another 4 years for this movie. But it does feel episodic in the story. Speaking of the villains, I loved what they did with the villains. Varang is just such a great villain. Great screen presence, I will say. I think she, by far the best villain in this entire franchise, and by far has the best screen presence, and when she disappears from the screen, the movie's not as compelling. And her relationship with Quirch is also really good in this movie. But another thing about Quirch that I really, really enjoyed, that I didn't mention in the review, is his relationship with Jake Sully in this, where it kind of feels like they're kind of back and forth. Both, how do I say this? It feels like they're going to try to make a redemptive arc for him in the future. And I wouldn't be opposed to that because Spider is his child and they're kind of just dads fighting basically over custody of the child. So you have the best villain arcs, and I did enjoy the story overall. Also, the action in this one is the best action out of the entire franchise. The air sequence in the beginning is the best action sequence in this entire franchise. Genuinely had me on the edge of my seat. And overall, the movie's paced better than all of the other movies in this franchise, where really until the end, there was never really a dull moment. Here we go again. The end just doesn't work for me, but this one specifically because it takes exact moments and scenes from The Way of Water and just says, screw it, we're going to do it again. Where you have the big crescendo being the whale jumping out of the water, and then a ship's going down, and Jake Sully's kids are kidnapped, and unfortunately, Varang just disappears from the final act. She's on a dragon, just flying somewhere, shooting bows and arrows. She just completely disappears. She doesn't matter in the story no more. So that just wasn't satisfying enough. But it feels like, oh, okay. Even like the plot, what the conflict is at the end of the movie is, that's the exact same conflict in The Way of Water. So it is the exact same third act. And as you know, the third acts just don't really compel me. So this one kind of started to bore me just a little bit in the third act. I will say this one held my attention for most of it. And as many problems as the third act has, seeing it in IMAX kind of fixed all that, because at least like I got 3D explosions in my face was still pretty cool. So overall, like I said, the Avatar franchise, not really my cup of tea. They're not going to be my most anticipated list when Avatar 4 or 5 comes out. But overall, I am glad I watched them, and there was my ranking of the films. Thank you guys for clicking on this video, and stay tuned for several other videos. And if I don't put out another video before Christmas, I hope you all have a Merry Christmas. Subscribe for my Christmas present.